There we go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, follow us at Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow us at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, follow us at Campaign for GLR. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be helping behind the scenes to produce this webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but also helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. Thank you. As we get started, I have just a few housekeeping details to share with you. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city, or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select everyone so that we all know who is here. And feel free to share your thoughts and insights throughout the duration of the webinar. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the webinar to respond to those questions, and our panelists will be typing out answers throughout the webinar. The webinar is also being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to the recording, as well as any slides, bios, and resources, will be sent in a follow-up email to all who registered. And lastly, we will be having a brief poll that will pop up during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And before we get started, I just wanted to really quickly call out some of our upcoming webinars. Later this afternoon at 3 p.m., we'll have a partner webinar on Equitable Literacy Instruction Part 2, ensuring the science of reading works for all children. On April 22nd, we'll have an exciting peer exchange at 1 p.m. on using data and messaging to tell an impactful story and effective communication in difficult times. April 29th, we'll be continuing our Kindergarten Matters series, this time looking at P3 principles and how to make them effective and successful in the school setting. And for all of you here today, very applicable, on May 6th at 12:30, we will be having a Crucible of Practice-a-lon focusing on first 10 communities and early math. This will be focused on the Young Mathematicians Initiative in York, Pennsylvania. So registration links and more information for these upcoming sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope you can join us. And joining you now is Miriam Sharp with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Sierra, and thanks to all of you for being here. If you're like me, the idea of spending time delving into math causes a kind of fear and loathing and maybe a bit of a cringe. So I really appreciate everyone kind of powering through that and joining us. I think you'll come away understanding just why we have the audacity to claim that it's fun and that anyone can do it. And that's just one of the apparent contradictions that we'll be flipping on its head today. I want to get things rolling by sharing a short clip from a new documentary called Counted Out. We'll post a link in the chat to the website where you can learn much more about the clip. But without further ado, let me turn to the clip to get us rolling.
My dad was sick and I wanted to be able to take care of him, so I wanted to work in the medical field. I ultimately wanted to be a nurse. Math has a lot to do with nursing, so that was intimidating, and I was like, oh, no, that's out the question because I can't do math. So I ended up going to vocational school first, and I was like, oh, I can be a medical assistant, and this way I'd be able to take care of my dad.
Math is the subject matter that is designed to sort. So we have actually created a subject that tries to tell us which kids have potential and which kids don't.
The fact that there is a hurdle that loads of people are failing tells us that there's an issue with the system. And if we consider math as a series of hurdles, higher and higher, and you're not allowed to try the next one until you've done the previous one, then we'll just keep getting rid of people at every stage.
So back in 2020, when we started to see the research behind the clip you just saw, and the research that made clear that the importance of math and the importance of starting early to put kids on the right path, we launched a series of webinars. And as you'll see in the slide, we've done 7 webinars on this topic. You can click, there'll be a link in the chat that you can click to access summaries of all of these webinars. Today, as you can see, is the 8th in the series. This time we're drilling down on how funders are creatively and with growing impact helping to ensure that more kids get started earlier on building a strong math foundation. You'll hear about how they're using their dollars, of course, and also about how they use so many of their other philanthropic tools. And as Sierra mentioned, on May 6th, we'll host the 9th session, going deep on a local initiative in York, Pennsylvania. And again, you can find out more about that session and register for it at the link that'll be in the chat. Throughout these sessions, we've come to appreciate just how much math kids can learn and learn at very young ages, and how much parents and caregivers can support them at home and in the community, in libraries, playgrounds, museums, grocery stores, bus stops, laundromats, and on and on. And that's another assumption to flip on its head. Math isn't just the arithmetic that professionals teach inside the school walls. We can all help build this essential foundation for kids, and we can have fun doing so. So let me tell you who you'll be hearing from today. You'll find a link in the chat box to the full bios, so I won't be going through those now. First, you'll hear from Holly Kreider, who is the director of the Center for Family Math at NAFSCE. And you know something is really starting to get traction when it has a center named about it. Then you'll hear from Claudia Ferrara, who will introduce you to the wonderful world of MathTalk that has inspired so many of us to believe in the power and fun of family and community math. Claudia will be joined later by MathTalk's founder and force of nature, Omowale Moses. Then you'll hear from 3 funders, starting with Kim Brenneman, Program Officer in Education at the Heising Simons Foundation, who has catalyzed so much of this work, and we're grateful for her support and her partnership. Kim will be joined then by Doug Ismail, the president of the California Masonic Foundation, and you'll hear about how they have creatively and energetically dived into this work. Then you'll hear from Greta Pradhan, who's president of the Cambridge Community Foundation, which has been a really important partner to MathTalk in their work throughout the community. With such a lineup, I'm really pleased that we were able to persuade Jess Tilley to moderate this session. Jess is a passionate advocate for early math and math education, and she's a director of math for the School District of Philadelphia. Jess, I'm going to turn to you and ask you to help us understand why an organization called the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is spending so much time on math. That seems to be on its surface a contradiction, and I know you and our panelists are about to tackle it. Over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Miriam, for the warm welcome for all of us. And pardon the background, but I am going to ride this Eagles winning the Super Bowl high for as long as maybe till the next Super Bowl. So I want to say good afternoon to all of you. And I want to start by giving major kudos to the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading under the leadership of my dearest friend, Ralph Smith. for understanding the inextricable link between early math and literacy, and recognizing through a very large body of research that early math is a powerful predictor of future academic success, not just in math, but also in literacy. I know we're going to hear more from Holly about that, and also overall cognitive development. We also know that early math is a predictor of high school graduation and employability and wages. And there's, again, numerous studies that point to this. And so I think to the question about why the campaign is leaning into early math, I think we're at a crossroads right now where the idea of reading to your child is more common knowledge than ever before, but how to engage our children in sense making and mathematizing their world is not. And while this crosses socioeconomics, and I have lots of stories about that, I won't get too deep into, but the lack of access to early mathematics for our young people in underserved communities will only continue this cycle of generational poverty. So I want to quickly revisit some of what we saw in the Counted Out clip. I did some math. And so Counted Out, the clip we watched talked about the percentage of Americans, fourth graders, American eighth graders, and American 12th graders not scoring proficient. But I'd like to sort of turn that statistic around. 36% of fourth graders, right, are not. But that means 64% are not. 36% are. And sometimes thinking about what that means for fourth graders who are not proficient is kind of, to me, a more alarming percentage. By the time we have our students in 12th grade, 76% of them are not proficient. So that means that if we take every four children, every four 12th graders, more than 3 of them are not scoring proficient. And why is that so alarming? I mentioned that early math is a strong predictor of wages and employability. So again, going back to that Counted Out clip, they talked about the average salary for a registered nurse in California. So a registered nurse in California has to have a strong math background. They have to be using applied math in order to get that degree. And that person makes about $124,000. An average salary for the medical assistant is $43,450. That's someone who was not proficient. So that's 3 out of 4 12th graders, right? Who's not proficient, who doesn't have access to become a registered nurse in California. So I did some math. I played around with some numbers. And let's just say that those 2 different people work for 30 years, okay? There is over $2,416,000 left on the table. And this is a tragedy because it is not necessary. And what we know is that all children are capable of math brilliance. So we have a mandate here. We have an opportunity, though. The exciting news is early math is not a fixed trait. It's something that can be nurtured, it can be developed, and families, caregivers, and communities play a critical role. I know I work for a school district, but I'm leaning hard into family math because I feel like family math has so much opportunity. So let's talk about what family math really is, right? It's about families and communities engaging their children and recognizing that there are opportunities all the time to lift up the math that is in their world. Children are natural mathematicians. Young kids are very curious, constantly exploring the world. They do that in ways that absolutely involve mathematical thinking. They sort things, they compare sizes, they think about patterns naturally. So our role is to recognize and build upon this innate curiosity. These early years of development, we've talked a lot the campaign has talked a lot about this. The field of education has been thinking a lot about the fact that the early years are ripe for rapid brain development. So young children are particularly receptive to learning new concepts, including mathematical ones. And ultimately, there is such power in play. Play is really the primary way that our young children learn, and quite honestly, adults prefer to learn through play as well. So when we help families, when we work with families, we partner with families and the community to think about how they can integrate the math concepts into playful activities like counting games, cooking together, building with blocks, storytelling with math, and so much more, learning becomes engaging, meaningful, and memorable. There's a lot of opportunity for community partnership. There are lots of places and spaces, and I'm so excited we have such an amazing panel here who can talk a lot about some of that work. But libraries, museums, parks, and other community spaces offer engaging and accessible opportunities for early math exploration. So all that to say that by recognizing the mathematical potential in everyday moments and making learning playful and interactive, families, caregivers, communities can significantly impact a child's early math development. And it's about fostering curiosity, encouraging exploration, showing children that math is everywhere, all around them, and it can be a really joyful adventure. And again, if early math is this lever, right, to academic success, but ultimately high school graduation, wages, employability, it is one of those opportunities that we must not miss. So I'm going to now pivot because I'm really excited that Holly Kreider is on this call. And Holly is, as you saw in the slide, she is at the Center for Family Math. And it's been such a privilege and honor to work with their team under NAFSCE, the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. I saw Vito here, so happy to see you. So Holly, I'd like to ask you to come on and the Center for Family Math is helping to lead this growing movement to engage all families in building their children's math skills through everyday interactions from birth on. So from your national vantage point on research and practice, what should we know about why math skills matter and what are the promising approaches?
Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much. Jess sits on our Center for Family Math steering committee and is a force for family math out in the field. So we're just grateful to be in partnership with you. And also just grateful for the campaign for shining a light on math so consistently. So I'll just, before I answer your two questions, Jess, I just want to say just a little bit more about the Center for Family Math. And I know Sierra was going to pull up a few slides for me too. But the Center for Family Math, as I think Miriam mentioned, is housed under NAFSCE, the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. And at the Center for Family Math, we're really envisioning a world where family math advances learning and equity for each and every child. And by family math, of course, a lot of what Jess touched on, we really mean those culturally relevant everyday math interactions and math talk that occur between families and kids from early childhood up all the way through adolescence, and that really add up for school and life success. So, we are really trying to amplify both the love and the power of math through family and community engagement and counter what Miriam said about that cringe factor that a lot of people feel around math, because math can be joyful and it can be fun, and it certainly can be powerful for kids' outcomes. And I certainly, everything in partnership. We focus on research, partnership, systems change, communications, deepening and expanding practice. I'd love to acknowledge our funders who are on this panel as well. Certainly the Heising Simons Foundation, which has been a seed and lead funder to the Center for Family Math, and our newest funder, the California Masonic Foundation, who is allowing us in partnership with others to really innovate on the ground. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Sierra. So what should we all know about math, to get to your first question, Jess? Math in the US is in crisis. I won't elaborate too much here because I think you all should go see the Count It Out documentary, where the case is really powerfully made for the math crisis that we are in and really have been in for 12 years. If you look at NAEP scores at the nation's report card, you'll see a downward slope for 4th and 8th grade math scores over time. While the latest NAEP scores in 4th grade math look kind of flat or maybe even have a little uptick, don't believe the hype and the headlines. You just need to disaggregate by one level to see that there is still like a real crisis and opportunity gap happening. So for example, in California, where I also pay attention to the CASP math scores, about just a little over a third of all students are, as Jess said, are proficient or advanced in math. But if you look at Latinx students, that's more like just a fourth, and African American students here in California, that's more like 1/6 are proficient and above. Not acceptable at all. We really need to attend to this for educational equity's sake. If you care about, the US being globally competitive, we are on the PISA international scores. US ranks 25th in developed nations. That sandwiches us right between Malta and the Slavic Republic. So lots of room to grow there too. That's age 15 math performance. And by the way, I'm rattling off a lot of studies, and I'm happy to put any links in the chat. Just ask for them in the chat, and I'll do that after I'm done here. All right, next reason why we should all know about math. Sierra, could you advance this? Okay. And this is the study that kind of converted me into a math fanatic. The Greg Duncan and colleagues study from 2007. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but the idea is that, kindergarten skills, math skills at kindergarten entry predict math skills at 8th grade, as far out as 8th grade. They also are as strong of a predictor of reading achievement at 8th grade as kindergarten reading skills. So if you care, and I know many of this people on this call do, if you care about long-term reading and literacy outcomes for kids, you should probably be paying attention to early math. And there's other research that just came out, as Jess mentioned, Brookings Institute, looking at how math predicts wages. And elementary school math is one of the strongest predictors of adult wages, especially for girls. So I can put that link in the chat too for those who are interested. Next slide. Why else should we know about math? Well, what we should know about math is that family engagement in children's math really matters. I think one of your pre-readings or attached readings is from Sarah Eason and colleagues. And this is just a cute graphic from my friends at Raising a Reader who put that into a visual. It's high parental expectations matter for kids' outcomes. It's a parent's use of MathTalk, the frequency of MathTalk, as well as kind of the robust math vocabulary. It's connecting to children's schools. I broadened that out to say partnerships with other adults and organizations that are supporting kids' learning and development. And it's a high quality home learning environment, including books and games and puzzles, all add up to knowledge, skills, and positive attitudes for math. So we really need to be paying attention to families. And there's also a meta-analysis that just came out in child development that shows that there's kind of consistent, modest but consistent impact of family engagement on kids' math, and that is across geography, across type of math interaction, pretty robust. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so a couple more things we should all know about math. The field is mostly ready, I would say, for family math. It's new, it's a new idea, but there's a recent poll out in Massachusetts that shows that, maybe about a third of families are concerned, have math on the mind around their kids, especially for non-English speaking families involved in the special education system. And when families become aware of how much of a crisis we have with math, that number shoots up. So, there's thought and there's obviously there's a lot of care about math for families that we can activate. Schools and educators, I think I don't know if they're ready, but pretty open. We did an interview study thanks to the California Masonic Foundation with 17 education leaders in public schools in California last year. And there was a lot of openness to really thinking about family math as a lever for overall math and academic achievement. And I would say what else was really interesting is how so many of the folks we talked to really thought about family engagement as literacy as a template, a frame for thinking about how to engage families in kids' math learning. There are also some districts that are really leaning in. I'd say even beyond the pilot phase, certainly Jess and her team and Philadelphia Public Schools are really, really comprehensively addressing family math. There's also been through ESSER funds, DC has embraced it. New York City to some degree, and we're really excited about our new partnership with the California Masonic Foundation to bring family math to students in LA through the LA partnership, the Partnership for LA Schools, and in partnership with Raising a Reader and Power My Learning. And there's a research agenda that's been laid out through our Family Math Research Consortium. I think that's one of the other links that's been provided to you already. I would also say that Stanford's Dream Network has just done a phenomenal job of pushing out research on early math and on family math. So check them out, DREME. All right, and next slide. Okay, and on to your second question really quickly here. I know I'm running out of time. So what are some of the things I'm excited about anyway, about this sort of subfield of family math? The first is really that I feel like some of the laying of the foundation for a movement around family math has started. Certainly, campaign has got a lot of awareness and sessions happening. We have built some real advisory and affinity groups with our steering committee, our Family Math Parent Advisory Council, with this dynamic group of parent leaders, and our Family Math Research Consortium that are all informing the Center for Family Math Strategy, but are also out there doing amazing work in the world and sharing it with each other. There are communications campaigns underfoot, under development. Certainly the Counted Out documentary is a shining star example of that. I'm also quite enamored with the Math Narrative Project, which is 6th grade and up. But the Gates Foundation is really starting to invest in and how some of those math messages can also be tailored for an audience of younger kids and families. And there's other groups that are also leaning into other funders, like the Simons Foundation, I'd say maybe Purposeful Ventures. They've done some really great reports lately that are also thinking about communications. And it's really important because math is tricky. And the way people think about math is often negative. We need to get underneath that, and we need to change that narrative. Next slide. All right, so here's some of the other things I'm really excited about. Like I said, districts are leaning in. Really excited to see some innovation, some partnerships that are, supporting school districts and beginning to leverage families as a part of an overall math strategy. There are literacy programs that are beginning to think about how to integrate math, like Raising a Reader, Tandem Partners in Early Learning. I think Marlene Kleiman is here from the Storytelling Math Project, which is like this gorgeous set of storybooks that have explicit math themes and guidance included. Really thoughtful. There are other family engagement programs that are integrating math. Pique, Abriendo Puertas, all groups that we connect with and that are our allies in this space. And but I would say is it's not about reinventing the wheel, but thinking about what you're already doing in ways that you can integrate math into that. There are some really exciting programs that are using kind of technology to enable family engagement in math. I'd include Power My Learning in that space. I would include Parent Powered there, Waterford, that are using either delivering training online, creating bite-sized interactions that kids and families can do at home, text nudging, all the whole gamut. And have beginning to have some compelling data that is actually making a difference for kids' math outcomes. And then last but certainly not least is this idea of funds of knowledge and community-based approaches. Marta Seville has really written about and researched and been a huge champion for thinking about those culturally based and everyday embedded family math activities and assets that families bring to the table. And certainly I would say that MathTalk, who I'm going to hand things over to next, and their really community-based approach is one that honors families and engages families deeply and as equal partners in the co-design of math community spaces. So really just there's so much going on and really excited to lift it up. So happy to put more links in the chat and invite you to check out familymath.org for more resources and program models. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much, Holly. Yeah, so you said so many good things, and a lot of exciting things happening across the country in pockets that we can really
Yes.
learn from and scale up and help other people understand. So thank you so much. Um, Holly mentioned Count It Out. We watched a clip of it. I will say every American in this country needs to see it. We had a question in the chat about, helping other people and families address, they have their own math anxieties. They've been shut out. Part of that is about changing math identity, right? Math esteem. And Count It Out is really critical piece of, making people understand that math is as impactful as it is, and everybody is a math person and everyone's capable. So all that said, I'm super pumped that Math Talk is here. Claudia and Omo are here with us today. So MathTalk's tagline is enjoy math everywhere. And your work offers a great example of how to make math fun, enjoyable, and accessible to our families. So can you talk to us about how MathTalk works and how do you know it's effective?
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everybody. My name is Claudia. Excited to talk to you all today a little bit about the work that we're doing at MathTalk. And so MathTalk is a children's media company that creates immersive digital and physical experiences with the goal to make math fun, meaningful, and valuable for kids and families everywhere. And so I think Sierra's going to start by showing a quick video. As Miriam alluded to at the beginning of the panel, if you did come in with some cringe factor around math, I hope after this video and what I share, that's mitigated a little bit, and maybe you'll be a little bit excited about the possibilities and opportunities around community math. And so I'd like to share the first quick video.
Hey, Daddy, can we take the long way to school?
What are we gonna do?
What do we always do? One humpback whale away.
Where's the map?
In the branches.
How many branches do you think the tree has?
I'll tell you tomorrow.
Bet.
I bet you 20 math bucks that this tree is less than 2 elephants tall. Told you. When can I get my math bucks? What time do you think it is?
Late.
But there's so much math everywhere.
Great. So in the video, you see Omo and his daughter Kamara engaging in what MathTalk is creating and calling these math-rich ecosystems. So Sierra, if you're able to put up that slide of the ecosystems, it'd be helpful to just walk through a little bit more of what that means. Great. And so using innovative technology, like you saw, some augmented reality paired with these place-based math trail experiences, MathTalk leverages local community context to promote playful and meaningful math learning across these different institutions that play a huge role in families' lives. So we're really thinking about how we can leverage technology across these spaces like schools, museums, zoos, and so on to extend math learning into children in families' real-world contexts in a way that aligns with the learning that is already happening in the classroom. And so if you go to the next slide, I'm really excited to quickly, I know I only have a few minutes, but to talk quickly about a pilot that we did last summer in Cambridge and in Boston with about 180 families around testing our new technology, which you saw snippets of in the video, which I describe as the Pokemon Go of math learning, our app called Math Everywhere. So the broad concept of the app is that families earn virtual currency, which we call math bucks, by exploring their local neighborhood and engaging in math activities. And then they can exchange their math bucks for real world rewards at participating businesses. So a family might solve some exciting math games or find out how many T-Rexes tall a tree is to gain a math buck. And then they can use that math buck to get a free scoop of ice cream or a haircut at a local barber shop. And so all of this works together to create what you see in front of you as this math micro economy that is really rooted in community and real world context. And so if you go to the next slide, this is just a brief overview of what we learned from caregiver reports after the pilot. And so we saw such great results with high reports of engagement, fun, and the experience facilitating conversations around early math between caregivers and kiddos. And just digging into that last finding a little bit more, Jess mentioned at the beginning of the panel about how reading with your child is commonplace and natural for caregivers and adults. We're doing the same for playful early math is not as comfortable or commonplace. And so the work that we're doing at MathTalk and with this technology specifically, we're really trying to create these opportunities and experiences to empower caregivers to have these conversations in math moments with their children. And if you go to the next slide, from a business perspective too, we saw such positive feedback with businesses really seeing themselves as pillars of the community and connected to early childhood education and just general child well-being. And I just love the quote that you see at the top where one of the business owners who participated said, "We thought it was a really interesting and innovative idea that brought together different generations and community members. Small businesses and education don't really go together." And we liked how it was intentionally making those connections. And if you go to the next slide, I want to pivot a little bit. And one thing I want to briefly mention is one more slide, sorry. Is thanks to the funding from the Heising-Simons Foundation, we also started to bring these math trails and these experiences into more informal learning spaces like community health centers. And so in this project, this was at a local community health center in Boston. MathTalk collaborated with researchers at Boston College and Dream to do a robust research study looking at the impacts pre and post installation of these math trails in the pediatric waiting spaces and in the exam rooms, and what our head researcher called embarrassingly large results and impact you see here on the slide. And so we saw increases in conversations initiated by children and just conversations between kids and caregivers. And these slides will be sent out, so I don't want to dig in too deep, but I think there will also be a link sent in the chat with a more in-depth playbook of what we did at Brookside Community Health Center and what we learned. And so I know that'll be thrown in the chat as well. So that'll be a link that you can go check out to learn a little bit more about that project if you're interested. And so if you go to the next slide, just we're really seeing these positive results around these key community stakeholders like caregivers, parents, kids, teachers, and practitioners. And again, you'll get these slides, so I don't want to dig into these outcomes too much, but all of this to say, all of these results in tremendous community impact was possible due to the national funding from Heising-Simons and the local funding from the Cambridge Community Foundation, which you will all be able to hear from, and just these amazing partnerships that we've created and cultivated with them, which I will turn it over to the other amazing panelists to talk a little bit more about in the next portion of today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Claudia. It really does take partnership both with national and local funders and then ultimately with our families. So Kim, come on. Thank you. It's so good to see you always. The Heising-Simons Foundation had this major investment priority for more than a decade, and you've shown some pretty significant results. So how and why did you get started on this? And what are your investment objectives and financial and more than money strategies today?
Sure. Thanks. Always good to see you too, Jess, and everybody else. I'm like bursting with things I want to talk about, so I'm going to try to stick to my answer here. So the origin story of the Heising-Simons Foundation investment in math, there's sort of three main reasons that early math is an investment area for us. First of all, there's like this really emotional and heart reason. Our board president, Liz Simons, is the child of a mathematician and a computer scientist. And so for her, math was just part and parcel of home life and play. It was part of family life. And so there's this very emotional connection to mathematics. As a trained teacher, as an adult, Liz noticed that there were some excellent classrooms that she was in with excellent teachers, but math still wasn't very much a part of what children were experiencing in their early childhood education settings. And so thinking about how we could bring more mathematics to those classrooms. And at the same time, the research that you and Holly both talked about, finding that early math is really the strongest predictor that was being tested, at least at that time, of later school success in both math and reading. So that's a kind of a head reason. So the head and the heart come together in the investments that Heising Simons has made. We really began in earnest in 2011, before my time. I joined in 2015, but since then, the Heising Simons Foundation's invested more than $110 million in early mathematics education. First, really focusing on research and understanding the importance of early math, the best ways to teach it, the best ways to engage families, and that kind of thing. So really focused on research around math in and out of school. And then in 2018, made a bit of a shift and really started to focus more of our effort on our home state of California, and thinking about how we could sort of get mathematics out there in the world, happening in communities, in organizations. So that's why we're here today, is really the partnerships that we've made that have enabled us to, see more mathematics out in the world and to support more adults and more children in their mathematics journeys. We, as I said, really are investing both inside and outside of classroom. And I know today we're focused a lot on what's happening sort of in families and communities, but we've had some questions about, well, what about educators? What about caregivers? What are we doing there? And there is a lot. So Holly mentioned the Dream Network. We have Doug Clements is here with us today, and he and his colleague, Julie Sarama, have done a lot of work with learning trajectories. So check out their LT Squared website for resources for educators that are also useful for families, but really so much out there thinking about that side of things too, and that's some of the work that we've done. For our community and family math, we focus on identifying and elevating the math of families, diverse families from lots of different backgrounds, that they do, and to help identify the effective family math practices and resources, the things that really make a difference for children's joy and excitement about mathematics, that really make a difference for the learning that they do. We're invested in informing and spreading the word about the importance of early math in children's life and the family's role in it. And so that's why we're here today. That's one of the ways that we're sort of, beside funding, we're trying to get the word out. And then we also are, with our partners are developing and disseminating culturally informed and culturally affirming resources that support math interactions and conversations. And our goals, we think, if we do this, that we hope that families are engaging in more mathematics, richer mathematics, maybe the kind that helps them undo some of their negative experiences with math themselves. I think it was Princess who asked the question, like, how do we bring adults into this if they've been sort of counted out? And that's such a good question. I hope we have time to talk about that more, because it is critically important. But we're really hoping that by doing this, we're helping children to foster positive math attitudes, that strong math identity that you talked about, and strong math skills. We really hope we can kind of break this unfortunate intergenerational transmission that we've had in this country of counting people out of math. We'd like to break that. So that's what our goal is.
Those are important and lofty goals. Glad that you're working on that with the Heising Simons Foundation. You recently completed a portfolio review. What did that tell you about what your investments have achieved?
Yeah, I think I want to start answering that question by saying that it was a portfolio review, but it's also a field review. And I want to make very clear that the Heising Simons Foundation has been a big player in this space, but certainly we have contributed, and that was one of the findings, to growing this field of early math, but it's contribution. It is not like we caused this. So I want to make very clear that any progress that I'm going to talk about having made as a field was made in collaboration with so many others. And when our partners, California's education partners, collected this data, surveyed our grantee partners, did interviews with field players, folks that are not our grantees. And some of the findings were that we have really made progress in growing a field of early math. We've seen substantial growth in our knowledge base, that research base that I talked about. There's a whole lot more attention being paid to this in education journals like Child Development and Early Childhood Research Quarterly. If you go to a meeting on early childhood education, you're much more likely to run across sessions on early math. So that's some of the knowledge growth we've seen over the last 10 or 12 years. We have seen, and this meeting is a testament to this, we've seen huge increases in the types of organizations that are showing up and saying they're engaged in early math. A lot of the grantee partners that were interviewed for this evaluation said, yeah, 10 years ago, we weren't doing this. We weren't thinking about this. This wasn't our area. And we're here now. And so it's so exciting to have people in this audience, on this panel who are coming to math from other areas. That's the only way we're gonna grow this and change things, change sort of public perception, change children's learning opportunities. And so the tight networks is another finding, that there's a whole lot more connection among us than there were in the past. More people doing this, more organizations involved, and just a lot more collaboration among folks. So that's really exciting. And the foundation is, the finding was the field was saying, yeah, the foundations had some things to do with that, but the big part of it, one of the big findings was it was building these connections. Using funding, sure, we can fund partnerships, but we can also get out and talk with organizations, support through having these panels, go out and be in community and just having conversations with folks and connecting folks with one another from our sort of national purview to make things happen locally, without money necessarily, our money being involved, and really just sort of connecting folks. So that's been a really exciting part of the work.
That's awesome. And I know that Heising-Simons was a major influence in the campaign for grade level reading, lifting up early math. So that connectivity is evident even in this meeting right now, as you said. Geeta, I would love for you to come on, and I would love to know how and why the Cambridge Community Foundation got involved in early math, and what are you doing through grant making and other philanthropic strategies?
So first of all, thank you. This is such an exciting conversation because, it gets to the root of some major problems that we are seeing not only in this country, but worldwide, which is growing income inequality. And as the Community Foundation for Cambridge, we have Cambridge, for those who don't know, the city is the home to Harvard and MIT, much in the news right now. But it's also a place that is a very expensive city and has extremes of wealth and poverty. And so these extremes in wealth and poverty is actually what motivated us to look at the issue of income inequality in our city. So our strategy to accomplish that is to focus on economic disparities while strengthening community bonds, because we feel like a community has to come together to be able to affect these bigger problems that we have. And as we focus on the issue of income inequality, I mean, we recognize, I think, what both Holly and Jess also mentioned, that that uneven educational outcomes actually follow a child's trajectory through life. So we saw that in 3rd grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, college access and success, and life earning data on the city. Sort of you recognize that if we don't do something about this, as I think was mentioned earlier, that you're affecting lifelong earning and lifelong trajectories, and also you're affecting future generations. So it's not the question of this one generation and one person not do well, but becomes an intergenerational issue. So we're doing a couple of things. One, at a systems level, we are working with the Cambridge public school system to follow the money. Our school systems have these very big equity goals of making sure that every child succeeds. But when we look at data on Cambridge, we saw that Black and brown children versus white and Asian children, there was a huge disparity. With Black and brown children achieving about, under 30% of proficiency, and white and Asian children, who tend to be from higher income households, achieving at 80 to 90% of proficiency. So we are actually working on an equity audit of the Cambridge Public Schools to follow their equity goals at individual schools with how they're spending money. And we're hoping that that will actually bring the focus on teaching and learning, which actually in a lot of school systems, as you know, probably ends up in being administrative costs and staffing costs and all that. So that's work at the systems level, but the aim of that is really to reduce these disparities in educational outcomes. At the ground level, we are investing in nonprofits in various ways, a lot of out of school, investments, a lot of investments, in infrastructure. But the one that I was very intrigued by was MathTalk, because of the interesting approach for two reasons. One is that it's inspired by Bob Moses' Almost Dad, and his push about the critical importance of math education in achieving economic equity and economic success. I think Dr. King also talked about that. And then the other one was that, that for many of us, I think Miriam said that at the beginning, that math can be very overwhelming and scary. And actually, even I was always very afraid of math, and I wish I hadn't been, because I think it starts with the family. Like if you're I think I'm a first generation college goer in my family, me and my siblings, but my parents hadn't been to college, and they didn't push the idea of math, or they didn't push the idea of reading. You went to school and you learned what you did, and you did your homework, but you didn't read or play. You didn't use these tools as playful, fun things to do. And I just really love, how MathTalk has made math accessible to both parents and their children by integrating math education in daily lives, from the bus stop to the pizza place to the barber shop to the park, the street, the school, and into the classroom. So, I think those are increasingly things that we need to look at, to make this fun, to make sure that children are engaged and enjoying it, so that it's not something that you fear, but it's something that you love.
I love everything about what you just said, and then ending with something that you don't fear but you love is so important. So how do we invest in those kinds of organizations and opportunities that create more of that love and less of that fear, right?
Yeah.
Doug, I have the same question for you. How did the California Masonic Foundation get involved in early math, and what are you doing through grant making and other philanthropic strategies?
Thank you, Jess, and I really appreciate being here. The Freemasons don't get invited to many national panels like this, so I just want to share that as an organization, we care deeply about equal access to education. For some of you may know a little bit about our organization, but Horace Mann, the founder of the Common School movement, was a Mason. And since then, it's been sort of a landmark outward-facing charity of ours to focus on equal access to public education for all. So our origin story and how we got engaged in math really started with our interest in literacy. I went to a conference and I heard a superintendent talk about the 3 pillars of academic success. He talked about literacy by 3rd grade, elementary school or middle school math or algebra at 8th grade, and college and career access and success. And boy, great. Well, we've got one of those pillars already. We already had a fairly robust scholarship program that focused on first and family kids from less well-resourced communities, and feel very good about how much we were investing in that. And so we thought, well, let's look at math and let's look at literacy. And we look at literacy and we find that there are lots of opportunities with literacy coalitions and folks rallying around literacy. This is in about 2005, 2006. And so we started funding in a book distribution program, which was basically dropping books out of helicopters and hoping upon hope that kids were going to engage and get excited about this. And I think what happened as we started asking better questions about the science and how this works, we as a donor organization became to be a little bit smarter about how we wanted to approach this. And really this was the sort of the first of some elegant matches that we were able to find. We, with all good fortune, stumbled across Raising a Reader. And Raising a Reader at that time had really laid out a really strong case for their work in early literacy. Now, this is 0 through 4. And they had a really bright person on that organization's staff, program director, a woman by the name of Holly Kreider, was on that staff at that time. And so we got with Holly and the executive director and asked if they'd be willing to bring what they were doing with Raising a Reader to kindergartens and first grades. And so lots of thinking, they went back, they talked about it, and they said, yes, we can. So the sort of origin story for us was there's this adjacent organization that does pretty close to what we wanted to do. We then got a full dose and passion for how family engagement. Holly comes from the Harvard Family Research Project, so her lens for this was really strongly oriented to family engagement, which made such good sense for us. There's an aspect of community building, an aspect of triangulating this relationship between a teacher, a parent, and a child that made such intuitive sense to us around literacy. And now 16 years later, we're now the largest donor in Raising Readers history. We're over $4 million. We've installed Raising a Reader in almost 1,000 classrooms in California, all from the least well-resourced schools in the state. So we're really proud of that. But we still had this math itch to scratch. We hadn't figured this out yet. We backed away from all the Common Core conversation about algebra and still had this math itch we wanted to scratch. And so when I saw that Holly had taken this position with the National Center for Family Math, I got in touch with her. And this is the kind of thing, I said, geez, Holly, tell us about what's happening. Well, it turns out that for us, this idea of almost the timing of when we started engaging literacy back in the early 2000s, some of that same energy and passion around family engagement and math has been bubbling up. Now, we don't want to be late to every party. And so I would love to think that by accessing and looking into the smart folks who are doing this work, people on this call, folks like Jess and Holly and others who are really deep in this, it really started to make sense for us to learn and understand how a small foundation, and we're a relatively small foundation, can get engaged in some work that would actually make a contribution to this whole conversation around integrating family math into this broader world of academic success. And so what we did was we asked Holly to make a whole bunch of phone calls, and she did. Holly and her team started communicating with folks all over the world. Some folks on this call may have been interviewed by Holly, I guess it was last August, July. And what we realized is early math needs the same sort of PR firm that early literacy had almost 20 years ago. There needs to be that same push, that same passion, that same emphasis on early math that was placed on literacy. And the idea being that we connect it to academic success, the science gets involved, which you heard Geeta talk about, which you heard all of our folks talk about, that when there's science involved, you can lead folks to this and it'll make an awful lot of sense. So we were fortunate enough to get Holly and Raising a Reader and Power My Learning and the Partnership for LA Schools all together and say, folks, can we come up with a pilot that might start doing some of this work, marrying these ideas that folks know from family engagement work with the lens of what was successful with literacy and early literacy and bringing that forward with early math. And so we just made a $950,000 grant to these 3 organizations to bring together a pilot, which we hope is going to make a lot of sense. Now, for a small foundation, that was a huge grant for us. But what we know is that we've got smart people doing work that is really backed by smart science. And so we have been now, we just funded it in February. And so we're excited about what's going to happen. But we love the fact, and I will share this with folks from around the country. We fund in California alone But the Freemasons have all levels of charitable engagement. We're sort of an under the radar charity, but one of the bedrocks of Masonic work is equal access to education for all. We believe that a democracy cannot function without broad access to public education. And so for those of you in other jurisdictions and other states, consider putting a call into your local, what we call Grand Lodge, and seeing if someone might be interested in talking about early math. Thank you, Jess.
I love that takeaway for people. It doesn't matter if you're in California, here in Philadelphia, I'm going to reach out to my local lodge for sure. So thank you so much, Doug. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about how your project goes and that investment and how that pans out. I'm sure it's going to be great. I have a question for the group of our national and local funders. So while Heising Simons may have been among the first foundations to invest in this area, we see from this call that, you know, they are not alone and there is an increasing activity, especially among local funders. And this could be for anyone in the funding group. How have you worked with and alongside other national or local funders in their initiatives, and how has their work helped inform or advance your own?
Am I supposed to go?
Not yet,
Yeah.
Omo, but
not yet.
very
Okay,
soon.
I
Yeah,
won't.
I'm just curious for the funders.
Yeah.
You have worked with each other, with other funders. How has that influenced your work?
You know, I would say that actually we, because Heising Simons was funding MathTalk, that inspired us to fund MathTalk. So, you know, these connections really build on each other. And we're in the early stages of this work, you know, with our educational equity work, particularly as we're looking at the equity audit of the Cambridge Public Schools. But I'm sure as we go forward, you know, we will be bringing others along, because when I look at our city, you know, it is, you know, it's a math, science, technology city. And without math education, we are creating a tale of two cities.
Good point. And it's actually good, Omo, that you did come on, because it was about MathTalk and how because you inspired Heising Simons, Heising Simons inspired Cambridge Community. And basically it's that, you know, domino effect where we get influential funders influencing other funders. And, you know, Kim, maybe local funders have inspired you all. Do you want to speak on that at all?
Yeah, I'm actually laughing. You see me chuckling because my recollection, Geeta, is that you were funding MathTalk. I got invited to Cambridge to talk with you, and you gathered other local funders and actors in Cambridge together. And I had been talking with Omo, and Holly was involved in that too, because apparently she's involved in everything that everyone on this call has done around math. She's the hub. But we were involved in these conversations, and part of what, you know, whichever origin story is the true origin story, both are accurate for how local and national funders can influence one another. And whether it's with this or some other things, where local funders who are on the ground in communities understand the challenges in their communities and communities like theirs, understand the actors who can make progress. Like, those are the folks I want to understand what they think is the right move to solve the problems in their local communities and the challenges, and to lift up the assets. And so for me, it's seeing that investment in a local organization or a group that has the potential to sort of scale and spread what it's doing, that's really special. And then sometimes we've found that we go in and we have some work that we've funded along with the Overdeck Family Foundation with PBS SoCal in Southern California. And that has attracted, local funders as well, who say, oh, you're doing this thing in this part of Los Angeles. Would you be willing, PBS SoCal, to spread it to this other part of Los Angeles County with our funding? And so it often, we've seen some spread like that, where local funders come in and say, hey, we want more of this in our community than is being funded by national funders or maybe other local funders. So that's exciting. And then just thrilling to have Doug here to give his perspective, because it's been our goal, as I said, sort of to create these connections where you have funding organizations that find the importance of early math for the goals that they have for their community, for their how math could be important for their strategic efforts. And so hearing from Geeta, hearing from Doug, like they're not early math funders. That's not what what their goals are. But it's really interesting how much we can find early math playing a role, whether you're interested in sort of early literacy and early learning and learning success, whether you're interested in solving this economic inequality issue, if you're interested in a thriving democracy, we can probably find a way that early math is linked to what it is you're trying to do. And so it's exciting for me to be on this panel with folks who are finding those links and here to talk about it. And, so it's interesting Omo popped on because I was interested in sort of hearing his perspective on this as someone who has been funded pretty continually by various local and national funders. Like what? So I'm taking over and starting to ask questions.
I'd also like to share, Jess, if you don't mind, that I think there's having been on both sides, I've been a fundraiser for most of my career as well as now a donor. And I think one of the things that is clear to me is that the expectation that organizations are going to come to us with the creative ideas, that our nonprofits, our grantees are going to come to us with these collaborative creative ideas might be a little unfair given what we know about the funding environment, about their own focus on their core work. And so I think a lot of times some of these ideas that come up, and we've heard about this today, actually start with the genesis of it is a donor actually reaching out to adjacent type organizations. Our work with Raising a Reader, the folks who come forward and say, boy, we know you're busy. We know you're doing great work in this core area. Would you be willing to consider this? Like when we went to Raising a Reader and said, would you be willing to reach into the K1 area? And I think acknowledging that as a reality for many of our grantees, and then trying to instigate the creativity on the donor side rather than waiting and then perhaps even getting frustrated with the fact that many of our own nonprofit grantees are so busy with their own really good work that they're not thinking about those sorts of things. So I love the sort of stories that I'm hearing about folks coming together and working with sort of adjacent organizations, and the fact that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is doing this is sort of the prime example of understanding how this interconnectedness makes a difference when we're all really looking to try to make the world a better place, improve outcomes for kids. And I think this is a great example of how that comes about. So kudos to you all.
Thank you, Doug. And Omo, if you want to answer Kim's question.
Yeah. Well, I think I've had a great relationship both with Heising Simons and the Cambridge Community Foundation, and in many ways I feel like it's been the same. And so with the Cambridge Community Foundation, Geeta's office was always open. I could come in and talk to her and share ideas. And so I remember, sharing those initial ideas around MathTalk, not trying to get a grant, but just saying, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm trying to see it in the local community. And as that conversation was taking place, there was also relationship building with Heising Simons. And so, there's been an opportunity to work with the Cambridge Community Foundation to create space for others that might be interested in what I'm doing to come together and potentially support that. And that was the case. And then I think for the Cambridge Community Foundation, they can give what they can give. And I think it makes it much more impactful if they do have others that can come in and help to sustain and grow work that they might only be able to seed. And so I've seen that, with the growth of MathTalk locally, they supported really planting the seeds for this work to take root. Heising Simons helped to sustain that. And, we're at a place now where we've been able to pilot it and generate results and really think about, how do we grow this regionally? How do we grow this nationally? And that will also involve, other local foundations, regional funders that can help to think about, how to bring this to more kids and families across the country. And so I also just want to add, math is really powerful. And I think part of what we are setting out to do is to change kind of the next generation's attitudes and experiences around math. And so, I had my kids, I was involved in my parents' math family business, and my kids are in, my math family business, and they're always testing out stuff. But I had experience with my daughter this morning just going to school. And so, she used the Math Everywhere app, which encouraged her to take a picture of something. And so she took a picture of the crosswalk, and then it generated a problem for her to do. And so I saw the problem. I was like, oh, that might be a tough problem. I'm not sure. But the answer is to it. And so while we were walking, her girlfriend came up and her friend's dad, and we're all walking to school. And I took the phone back, and 2 blocks later, they told me the answer to the problem, and then they just went about their daily business. And so part of, I think, what we need to do is really shift this narrative and around the relationship that we can have with math. And I think part of what is important is that, we just need to normalize kids and parents and families engaging with math in ways that are interesting and meaningful. And part of the importance of that is that's going to create what I would think of really an army of kids that are ready to go into public school and are confident about their ability and are capable. And, we need to put pressure on the public school systems to be able to, keep accelerating these kids. And part of the way my dad framed it was this idea of just raising the floor for math literacy for all kids. And I think as we think about, this country and where we are today, I think part of what we're seeing and what we need to see is, how do we move away from this idea of sorting kids to play specific roles to, how are we thinking about preparing kids for citizenship? How are we thinking about preparing kids to participate in the economic and political life of this country, and to really make democracy a possibility? And so, I think math and early math plays a critical role in supporting and challenging our systems to be able to do that.
I love everything that you just said. I'm so glad this is recorded. It's not just about social mobility, right? It's about being an economic mobility. It's about being able to engage civically and hold on to democracy, right? I'd love for everybody to come on now. I have a question, and actually, Oma, I'm going to start with you. So for funders who want to get started in this area or who want to do more, what suggestions do you have about places to dig in, and what resources and partnership opportunities are there to support them?
Yeah, I think, Housing Simons has been a tremendous funding partner. And, I think they've been an ideal partner in thinking about the relationship that a grantee can have with a foundation in terms of just being in conversation and thinking through ways in which you get to know the grantee and figure out, like, how you can collaborate or partner. And so, I just say that to say, like, for us, I think Counted Out, Housing Simons, kind of the network that they've created, is a good opportunity to learn more. From MathTalk's perspective, Claudia shared a bunch of stuff. So, we're happy to share more about what we're doing to create these local math-rich ecosystems. And I think it's a way for a local foundation to think about, how to do something that's impactful locally, but that also has the potential to scale more broadly. We've done some exciting work with hospitals and health centers. And again, as we work with them, hospitals and health centers are thinking about the overall health and well-being of the community. but it's been exciting to see how they think can connect to math as part of that solution that can create a bridge across a range of stakeholders in the community. And so, I think there's an opportunity there to think about, how we can help those institutions really become catalysts for, creating a new math experience or helping support these really positive and healthy math relationships at the community level.
Thanks, Omo. And we're actually having a math trail is about to be unveiled in the Philadelphia School District, so I'm very excited about that. And I love the idea that these different places can be, like you said, catalysts for creating different experiences outside of school for children and families. And someone even in the chat had talked about missed opportunities in doctors' offices, waiting around. That's a perfect place for, families to be encouraged and provided some guidance on how to engage their children. Holly, I'd love to turn over to you. You're bringing together all kinds of different organizations and funding opportunities, and you've really done an incredible job of supporting funders to align, right? I'd love to know what you're thinking about right now in terms of how do we, what suggestions you have about how funders might be able to start digging in.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Well, ditto to everything everybody else has already said, and just even on this funder piece, I think it's that multi-year flexible funding from the Heising Simons Foundation that has allowed us as a center to turn outward and to innovate, to connect with other organizations doing exciting work, and to have conversations. I mean, with groups like the California Masonic Foundation and to bring together other partners to do work more regionally. I just also want to highlight relationships have been super important, and Doug has mentioned it too, right? Like relational grant making is no joke. And that kind of that trust, that ability to take risks and innovate as a big part of how this whole, tangled web comes back together for California Masonic Foundation and me professionally anyway. So thank you, Doug. I think, the first thing I would say is kind of funny. I mean, I would just say sort of reflect, first of all, on your own feelings about math and as a starting point to thinking about how to engage and invest in math. This is what we say to everybody who's sort of newcomers to this idea. Then I would say listen to families and listen to beneficiaries, listen to your grantees. We interviewed like 12 what I'll call unicorns, folks who are really in this intersectional space between family engagement and math. And it's the number one thing they say. Just listen to family, reflect on how you feel about math and listen to family. So I think that's and also if you want to begin to integrate math, whether it's into your investment portfolios or whether it's you're a community-based organization thinking about bringing math into what you do, think about what you already do. It's not reinventing the wheel. Think about what you already do and how math can begin to be integrated into that. In terms of places to look, I'm just going to be sort of self-promoting here, even though it's not me, it's all of us who are part of this Center for Family Math and this Family Math movement. But FamilyMath.org is meant to be a hub. We're still building that out very much, but there's a whole online searchable toolbox of family math resources for practitioners that are aimed at practitioners and parents and caregivers. There's also a robust research section. So I invite you all to take a look at it. We've got webinars that are lifting up some of the exciting work of groups, including MathTalk on this panel and others. We're blogging and having guest blogs by people in the field. There's all sorts of good stuff there. And then I just invite like connection. This is the thing I love most about my job is I loved it most in my job when I was in working at a foundation as well, is just making connections. So I just invite anybody to, connect and let me help point you in the direction of all the good stuff that's happening.
I love that. And the campaign for grade level reading seems to be this hub of connectivity, right? Connecting so many of us, right? And those connections just spider out. It's amazing. I'd love to get to some of the questions in the chat for everybody. And actually also want to mention that a poll should have just popped up on your screen. And so take a moment to check off, fill out that poll for us. We'd love to get your thoughts and feedback. I know the campaign is always looking to grow and get better at getting better. But I want to throw this question out. There's a few questions that are sort of related around the idea that so many people have been counted out. And so we have, whether it's early child care educators or families and community members who don't feel empowered, they don't have a strong math identity, and they have limited experience, perhaps educationally. What would you recommend? What research might be pointing to how we can support families in that way? How might we help the adults who already feel uncomfortable with math help children? Holly, you mentioned, first, like we have to examine our own how we feel about math, but are there any promising practices out there right now that you know of that's really changing how people feel about math? And anyone can jump in on this.
I will just say that that evaluation that we talked about that we did, that was one of the top level findings and recommendations for the future, that we will not make the progress we want to make until we figure out how to change adults' views of mathematics and themselves as math learners and math supporters for young children. And so I'm sure we're going to be working on some two-generational kinds of approaches to that. And some of our partners like PBS SoCal have done some, do some two-generational workshops with families. We have Abriendo Puertas, who just incorporated mathematics into its curriculum for parents to support their leadership in their families and communities. And so we have started to integrate that into it, but that finding is real. And so I appreciate the participants who brought it up. And I think this field and all of us now know that that is an absolute must do in order to move forward with young learners. We need to work with, support, learn from the families and early educators that we hope to partner with to improve children's learning opportunities.
Geeta, you're on mute.
Oh God. Hi, I'm actually really looking forward to the narrative work because that math education and its connections with so many things, I think this conversation sort of highlighted some, whether it's democracy or education equity or life, trajectory and economic equity, and just like so many different ways. And, I think it's important to, building a little bit on Kim's point, that the parent generation actually is a little bit of the problem, like my parents were, they didn't see the importance of that early reading, early math. It was like, yes, academic success, you're going to school, you're doing well, your grades are good, but that deep understanding and that comfort with something. I think it's really going to be important to change the narrative on these and also recognizing the fact that by the time kids are like in middle grade, their minds are already made up about what they can and what they cannot accomplish. So if they start with this thinking that they cannot accomplish math and it's a thing to fear, it's going to stay with them for a lifetime.
So true. We lose about 30%, I think, in third grade who say they're not math people. And I think by fifth grade, it's 50% of all children. And we looked at those statistics earlier about who's proficient in math. So you make a really important point, Geeta. I'd love to know, I see a question about rural communities. Many of the examples shared today seem to be focused in urban areas. Are there examples of how we might encourage some of these initiatives in our rural communities or of ways to make this information applicable to rural communities? Does anyone want to answer that question?
I was waiting on Claudia, but she's waiting on me.
I was waiting on you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the math trails and math everywhere, we're interested in the applications in more rural communities, and we're beginning to think about a couple pilots in rural communities. But again, math is everywhere. And so there's as much math in the rural communities as there is in the urban communities. I think it's just a matter of thinking about, I was just down south, and, in Jackson, Mississippi, it wasn't not a lot of sidewalks. And so it's not like a walking community. And so the context for how people move around and where they move to is a little bit different, but they all move around, they go places. And so it's just a matter of elevating those spaces as resources for math learning. And I think that's really the approach, and this really comes out of the Algebra Project, but it's like, how do you help people learn in context, in community? And, there's so many things in everyone's community, whether it's people, whatever the assets are. And our goal is to really turn those into like fun, meaningful, valuable math resources and math moments.
And I just add, we're in partnership with the State Family Engagement Center in Maine, which is predominantly rural. And there's just been a lot of excitement and interest around family math. And I think just doubling down on what Almost said about, math in community context and in schools too. We've been doing community of practice, piloting a community of practice with classroom educators in Maine. We've been doing district in-person institutes, and sometimes that district level person in a very small district is also a principal and has many different roles. And we've been thinking about how some of the things that are delivered online could be another kind of resource. But again, you have to be very careful, because even in rural communities, there's still real connectivity challenges there too. So what are everyday objects where math can be promoted at home, regardless of your access to other, community spaces, for example, or materials?
Thank you, Holly. I feel like we could talk for hours about all of this, and apologies to anyone whose question did not get answered, but feel free to reach out to any of us on the panel. We would love to connect beyond this webinar, and I'm going to throw it back to Miriam. Thank you, everybody, so much for being with us, and Miriam, take it away.
Hey, thanks very much, and that was a perfect segue, Holly, because I am sitting here in Portland, Maine. So thanks for the shout out to great work in Maine. Geeta went up to me at the beginning of this program. I said, I hoped that we'd all come to love math. We'd all come to think math was fun. Geeta challenged us to get everybody to love math. And if this panel, I think this panel could make it happen. So I want to invite our wonderful audience to give a round of applause to our fabulous panel. And I want to invite the panel to give a round of applause to our fabulous, highly engaged audience. And all of us to especially thank Jess for being such a fabulous moderator, getting us through a mountain of content. We could go for hours more. And I'm going to advocate that we have a part 2 of this program, because there's much more to focus on. A reminder that if you found this content engaging, really look at the 4th item on this slide, the Crucible of Practice Salon on May 6th, that's going to focus on the Young Mathematicians Initiative in York, Pennsylvania, which happens to be a fairly rural place. So thank you all. Please, if you haven't done so already, please do fill out the poll and join us again for our next sessions. Bye to everybody.